Hello, I'm Ethan, your host and friend on this remarkable and hopefully eye-opening dictation journey that we're pursuing together. And here in the second episode, it's going to take a slightly different turn. Last time we looked at Brahms 1, pardon me, the second movement, and how the string texture and the different voice leading features of the movement are very classical, very clearly influenced by Bach and the Bach chorales and the four parts that we're used to in dictation classes. But here we're going to focus on something that might seem rather daunting, but I think it's a lot more approachable if we conceive of this example in the right way. So today we're going to be focusing on fugue, and fugue ever since the time of Bach, even before, has been viewed as a means by which composers can hone their craft in a very small and incredibly concentrated form. Very complex contrapuntally, but a step-by-step process that composers can get more and more comfortable with. It's not just genius, there is method to the madness, and it is a sort of method that imparts a lot to a composer's other activities that might be less formal and less rigid. So here we're going to be looking at the exposition, the Fugal exposition of a three-voice fugue. This is Book 2, A minor, BWV 889. And I think what will be fascinating about this piece, or rather this example, will be that as amazingly complex and intimidating as writing a dictation for a fugue may seem, it's a lot more straightforward. And what I mean by that is, we'll see. So I'll play the example first, and once I'm done, pause the video and reflect a bit on what you hear, what seems to recur, what are different similarities, and think theoretically. Don't think as if you were in a dictation class. Think more like, how is this piece organized? How do the voices relate to each other? What are the main motives? How is this constructed? And I think, as often in a dictation class, theory's our friend. So, without further ado, I apologize for my piano playing in advance. So, what seems to recur? Now, this A minor, you can pause it here. Might be a good place. All right. So, what's distinctive about this fugue, aside from the diminished seventh, the melodic diminished seventh in the subject, which is not incredibly often, but definitely a recurring feature of a lot of minor key subjects. This that will make it a lot more difficult for entries or statements of the subject in the future to occur in major, because that would be a little bizarre. Something you could do once or twice for variety, but not dwell too much on. But that, in addition, this is a fugue with a counter subject, a fugue with a very lively counter subject. One thing that fugues, the study of fugue will often exhibit is and encourage is a composer to create variety within a very concentrated structure. And because the subject is within, this is in common time, by the way, it's in quarter notes and eighth notes, the counter subject has to fill in a lot of that space. So their 32nd note runs in the counter subject, which again, although they might seem a little bit intimidating, I'll admit I was definitely a little bit concerned when playing them and worrying worrying a little bit about my technical facility on this instrument. But in any case, listening-wise, it could be a little daunting. But good news for us, there is a counter subject. He could have very easily written counterpoint that he doesn't bring back and back time and time again, in which case we'd have to find new counterpoint every time he writes a subject. This time it's not. So once we nail the counter subject, we'll have it. The other thing you might note is that because the subject starts on the fifth of the scale, so E, mi, this subject will have to be altered in some way in the answer. A true real answer will not function here because, well, let's hear. Subject. Not bad, but this, instead of the stronger being instead having a 5-6-4 chord as a dominant function instead of a 7-6 going to 1 E minor. So you have to alter that. But aside from that, the subject and the answer are the same. So once you have the subject down, once you have that notated, aside from that A, the first note being first scale degree, fifth scale degree, whatnot, fifth scale degree of A minor going to in the answer. Aside from that, we've basically got one of the voices already just because we have the subject. So you don't have to focus on the answer. You don't have to focus on notating that. It's already taken care of. And that frees up our brain to focus on this running stuff. So ignore the answer. And when we look at that, that's fast, but it's most certainly not too complex. The running features, diatonic in E minor, also diatonic. Outlawing the 5-7 of E minor, 5-7 of 5, and having the same figure. And all of that we basically have. It's repetitious. We don't really have to focus on the answer. And we can notate that. That's relatively simple. We don't need too many times. Good news for us, it also comes back as the alto voice. When the soprano, the third voice to come in, it's a bass, alto, soprano fugue. When the soprano comes in, the bass will mostly drop out for much of the statement of the subject. So if we just focus our attention on the top two voices, the soprano and alto, we have. And we already have that basically because when we did the bass and the alto, that was basically the core. We just notate that. The only thing we have to be aware of is that since the soprano comes back in A minor, it is again the subject, not an answer. It takes the original form, but good news for us, note for note. Now, we still do have to worry about the bass. But here's the bass line, and let's see if we can notice some stuff about it. Basically, just a stepwise ascent from ornamented, of course, but relatively simple. Then we look again, so let's hear this whole passage, these whole two measures. The only added feature is this. And again, motivically, harmonically, referring back to the subject. And all dominant functionality. an arpeggiation. Very straightforward. And even if it's not, we can already compartmentalize and realize that in the two top voices, because we already have the subject and we already have the counter subject notated previously, when those were the only voices, when it was the bass and the alto, we don't have to focus on those. We can basically transpose them back into A minor from the E minor that was in which the answer was presented. So again, all of which is to say, I'll play this all again. But basically the moral of the story is, with a 3-part or even a 4-part fugue, because many 4-part fugues for the most part will only have 3 active voices really at any one point. And yes, at the very end of an exposition, yes, there will be the 4 voices, but some of them will be basically static. There may be a counter subject and a subject that we have already, which turns the rest of the dictation into a 2-part exercise between the 2 voices that are in free counterpoint. It's relatively straightforward. So let's listen to this one more time and see if we can notate all of it. All the while thinking how prohibitive our attitudes were towards notating this in the beginning, and now, after peeling all of the different layers of the artichoke, we've really arrived at the essence, the heart of what this exercise example experience is all about. And we are done with the exposition. We've got it. The voice leading works out well. Because a fugue is not just witchcraft and musical witchcraft, counterpoint has especially Baroque counterpoint, has a very, very real basis in the voice leading we've studied. We can check ourselves to see if we've made mistakes, if something doesn't seem quite right. The harmonic vocabulary, even in this little episode or link between the answer and the final subject in the soprano. We have a sequence. Sorry. So, I will leave you guys there for now. I've attached a few of my favorite recordings in the comments. I know everybody has their own favorite Well-Tempered Clavier recordings. I love harpsichord, and in particular I love certain harpsichordists who seem to reside outside the piano tradition, if that makes sense. Certain harpsichordists being more pianistic in their training. And I've attached a few links. If you don't have any favorites, if you have any favorites, if you're a big Richter or Feinberg or Goulda, Schiff, Gould, what have you not, fan, far be it from me to tell you your taste is wrong. So yeah, explore these pieces. Think about how you might approach them next time if you had to dictate a fugue. And I'll see you next time.